Hello everyone and welcome. Today we're going to be looking at the BrightSign devices. There are a ton of different devices out there that BrightSign do, and we're going to cover each and every individual one of them and see what the benefits are, when we should use them, and when they're suitable for our digital signage projects. We're going to be focusing today on digital signage, so there are 4 different devices that we're looking at. One of the ones that we are missing is the AU, which is an audio-only device, as it's not really relevant to what we're talking about today. But we're going to cover everything else and get you familiar with what you have in front of you or what you're potentially looking at. So let's get started with finding out what BrightSign is. So to simply describe BrightSign, it is this purple box. If you can see it in front of you there, this is basically the design that they have across the board. They're always kind of rounded edges and they're always purple, so you can always identify a BrightSign from a million miles away. BrightSign is located in the head offices in California, and they're basically a global availability. So you can go and find these pretty much anywhere. And one of the biggest benefits to BrightSign, and one of the things that we've experienced when talking to customers and clients that are using BrightSign today, is how solid and robust they are. Everything is solid state, so there's no moving parts, no wearing, so it's completely silent, and it means that they're almost entirely bulletproof. We've had situations where companies and clients have built up 300 devices, scheduled and deployed them in one day, and haven't had any failure rate. So really, they are excellent in terms of robustness, and they are a commercial product. So unlike some of the lower level products that we're looking at out there, like Fire Sticks or Raspberry Pis, these are definitely designed to go the distance in terms of duration, and the warranty kind of matches that. So that's something to consider when looking at your digital signage hardware, what is going to be adding more benefit to you. So a few things before we go into the individual players. We also have to look at what these players come with by default. Now we'll start with the LS player just because that has everything that you might possibly want on there, but not the additional pieces, which we'll talk about on the players as we go through. So if we're looking at this device, it has a HDMI, but it only has one. So that is our HDMI output. Being able to plug that in via HDMI cable, you'll be able to then display it onto whatever display you're looking to show onto. It also has an Ethernet port, so obviously Ethernet for your internet. It doesn't have a Wi-Fi module built in. You will need to look at buying a Wi-Fi module separately if you need to. There is also a reset button, so there is no off button on any of the BrightSign devices. Once you've plugged it in and powered it up, it will display automatically, but you can reset it there as well. MicroSD, you're going to need to have a MicroSD that goes into this device to actually store the content that you're publishing to it. Because most of the CMSs, including ourselves, we're not actually streaming that content permanently. It's downloaded and stored on the player locally, which adds massive benefit because it continues to run offline. It has all the ability that you need to run it even if the internet was severed for any particular reason. But that does mean that you do need a microSD. So one of the things you should consider when looking at BrightSign is, what size microSD am I going to need? I think most of these are running 32 gig, they are, and that is just a large amount of space, so we know we're never going to fill these up most likely, but you should consider that, and just make sure you've got the right SD card before you get started. So let's get started with the first device, which is the LS device, the entry-level player in the BrightSign model. This is normally starting around $275, and obviously that will vary depending on where you're purchasing it from, and it is the entry-level model. So some of these larger models in front of us here we'll go into later have some additional functionality, but let's have a look at what this player can do and what it's well suited for. So it's H.264 compatible, which is good news. It basically means it can play a range of media assets that you'd expect to see out there today. So things like image files and video files that are suitable. H.264 is basically an encoding file for a video format, and it also will support things like MP4 files that you'll be expecting to display on here. It's not capable of running 4K, so it's a 1080, 60 frames per second player, so it means that anything like these screens here that aren't 4K will be able to run full screen content at HD, just like you would expect from any device out of the box, especially for a commercial product. But if you are looking for 4K capabilities, you're going to need to look at a slightly better device to build up on that. The LS player is capable of running HTML5, so it can run things like web pages, it can run other HTML5 content as well, such as apps from a marketplace or any kind of widgets that you're looking to display. However, it is only entry level, so bear in mind there are some more advanced levels, and that includes things like motion, animation, more data that's going to be displayed on your screen, pinch zooms, effects, anything like that. You're going to need a little bit more power and robustness to push out something like that, but simple web pages with simple designs and little motion to no motion, this is going to be absolutely fine for. IPTV streaming, so if you are looking at displaying live TV or an IPTV source, this can do that. However, there is only one HDMI, and that HDMI is out, so it's going to be able to display to the screen, but there's no way of pulling any HDMI in. So if you want to display live TV through a live top box, then this isn't going to be the player for you. IPTV streaming is the way to go. So things like live streaming through YouTube, which we've got an article on, or live streaming through your own IPTV service, this is going to be perfect for as well. It does support multi-zone, so right now on this screen we have single zone, but obviously you've probably seen in the past where we've got content showing multiple zones of content at the same time, so it's fully capable of doing that. One limitation to bear in mind, that is because it is the entry-level player, it can only support one video file running on the screen at the same time. So if you're looking at having two videos running concurrently at the same time next to each other, this player isn't going to be for you, so you're going to need to look up a little bit more in the hardware quality. But it is more than capable of running multiple zones of content, so if you want a video file plus an image file, then it should be absolutely fine running that, no problem at all. Every single BrightSign across all of these devices, including this one, has a functionality called bdeploy. Now, to go into bdeploy in a little bit more detail, bdeploy allows you to schedule and configure your players in volume. So for example, if you wanted to install Signage Live across all of these devices, and let's say you have 300 devices, then you can do that by using a CSV file which holds all the information about the player, so what license it has, what level, what the player's name is, where it's located, what configuration you want. You can build all of that into a CSV file and upload that, which means rather than having to go one by one on each individual player, you'll be able to do that en masse in volume, which saves you a huge ton of time. We've had experiences where 300 or 400 players are spun up within a day, rather than weeks worth of manually configuring each of these individual devices. There are other bits and pieces across these players that we'll talk about, but we'll continue on to them because some of them are unique to those particular players, so we'll focus on that as we go forward. The next one up on the scale is the HD4. The HD4 is slightly more robust than the previous LS player, and again the price goes up because of that. So we're starting around $375, and again same level of quality in terms of commercial grade product, designed and obviously simple to install when it comes to utilizing this. One of the things we haven't mentioned so far about the BrightSign devices is they are standalone players, which should be pretty clear by now, but what that basically means is you can use any screen or any device. So if you've got existing players, existing screens that you want to utilize, then you can have one of these BrightSign devices, just put them on the back, and that will then convert it into a digital signage screen for you. Again, that doesn't mean it's not necessarily suited for a new installation, it just means it gives you that variability. So for example, the benefits of using a BrightSign in a new installation is, should you ever need to change out a player, rather than having to replace the entire screen, you just swap out the hardware and reconfigure it and it's ready to go again. So back onto the HD4. It is H.264 just as everything else. I'm going to start skipping some of the pieces that the LS had. Everything that the HD4 has, the LS has too. So just to go over those really quickly, H.264 compatible, IPTV streaming, multi-zone compatible, bdeploy as usual across the broad range there. Now what this does have on top of the LS is true 4K. So this will be able to run 4K content across your 4K screen. So if you're looking for 4K content, this is definitely the next jump up that you want. It also comes with mainstream HTML5. So all of that content that you'll see across most web pages will be able to run through this HD device, and you can continue to display that content across other assets, so images and videos and web pages at the same time. So it does have improved HTML5 and also true 4K. It also comes with extended thermal, which means it is set to run at a temperature of 70 degrees or lower. So it just means that it's a little bit more suitable for warmer environments. So if you're working in QSR, or if you're looking at displaying this in restaurants that you're near heated temperatures, definitely worth considering that, just depending on whereabouts you are in the world and what kind of environment you're going to be putting these players into. The HD players do come in a selection of ranges, so this one does actually come with the expanded version, which this is, and you can tell that because of its USB input, so you can start to input interactive elements into your devices. So for example, Nextmosphere is one that we've used in the past. You'll be able to input that into the USB and allow your content to be triggered via a local source or a local trigger. So worth looking at which one's going to be best for you. If you're not looking at doing any interactivity, you don't need to go for the extended player, but you can consider it if you need to, just for future proofing, but the extended version does give you that additional functionality if you need it. Just a side note here on the HD players, although not necessarily something that everyone's going to be interested in or using, is there is also a standalone version, or basically a built-in system on chip, which instead of giving you the BrightSign box and the purple here, you'll be given the interior or the internals, which you can then put into the back of a screen completely to make a system on chip solution. This is listed as the HS124 or HS144, which is the extended or non-extended versions, which basically means you don't have a box at all, you have the chip and you put it in. Most likely that's going to be interesting for you if you're a larger integrator and you want to create a full-on solution with everything packaged into one device, but they do offer that if you need it. Next, we're going to move on to the XD player. So XD, again, slightly bigger in terms of size, but it comes with advanced HTML5. So really this can start doing pretty much anything that you'd want to do with your HTML5 content. So if you're looking at creating an entire solution where your content is HTML5 driven and you've got data coming in and you've got motion and you've got animation, pinch, zoom effects, this is definitely going to be the player for you. It also has mosaic mode. So the HD4 and the LS4 don't have this functionality where you can actually display multiple zones of videos running at the same time. This is the first device that can do it, is the XD4. So if you want to run multiple video files at the same time on the same screen, this will be the device that you need. And again, this comes in the same way as the previous one with the HD, where it has a extended version with the USB output. And with the USB output as well, the extended version comes with Type A and Type C and serial control for engagement. And again, that's more about triggering. Do you want to create a triggered environment? Finally, we're looking here at the XT4 and what this has over the other devices. So everything we've talked about so far is included in this player as well. But what it also comes with is true 4K dual. So unlike the XT4, where you can display in mosaic mode multiple zones of content over a 4K screen, which means the total canvas that you're going to be working with is 4K. With the 4K dual, you could run two concurrent 4K pieces of content at the same time. And to kind of expand on that, what that means is if you had an 8K screen, you could have two 4K pieces of content running at the same time via the mosaic mode. Basically, this means it's a very powerful piece of equipment when it comes to delivering content to your screen. And any combination you might want to put in front of this in terms of the content functionality should work, no problem. On top of that, it also has enterprise HTML5, which basically means the world is your oyster when it comes to HTML5 content. You can throw pretty much anything at it and it should be able to run it as long as it's optimized to run on the device and running correctly. And it just means that you've got full capabilities of running whatever it is, whether it's multi-zone video in mosaic mode, plus some incredibly complex HTML5 content as well. And on top of that, it also has the capability of running PoE, or Power over Ethernet. So obviously you do have your power ports on each one of these devices, but the optional extra in this device to run the power through the Ethernet cable, which just removes one of the cables that you're going to need to manage on site. So you've got your Ethernet cable and then you've got your extension of the power going through that as well. So again, this is by far the kind of top of the range model, and it does do everything and anything that these players do, plus some more, and it comes with that extended option as well with the USB. So also with the XT range, there is the 1144, which is the one that I've got in front of me today. What that actually means is, as the option with the XT range, is it has two HDMI ports, one in and one out. So as well as being able to run your full screen content via the output, you also have the option to input something via HDMI. So for example, if you're looking to run live TV, then this could be really beneficial for you. Definitely something worth considering in advance. If I am running live TV and I'm using my input, I can have a top box or some kind of device or a laptop, whatever I'm running, and that's going to go into my BrightSign device. That then allows us to control that content just like we do with any other image or video file. So if I want to run my live TV via this top box in the top right hand corner of my screen and have the capability of the remote so I can change channel, but the rest of my screen is still utilizing that complex HTML5, or it's running some video file, or it's running images, then I can do all of that, and configuring and scheduling that live TV is actually run by your CMS, which means that you can be running hundreds of devices running live TV through a top box, but managing and configuring when that content will actually display and schedule completely remotely. So that's another thing to consider with the XT4. So there are just a couple of other things to mention with the BrightSign devices here. The XT also has that expanded version which we talked about with the USB and the HTML5, and there is also an identical version which is the XT1144T, which for those of you in the US that are looking at working in federal government is approved by the Trade Agreement Act. So there is a separate version of that specifically designed for federal use if you're in a government location that does follow the Trade Agreement Act terms that need to be followed. So that is our BrightSign device range. Now, there is some additional things just to mention, so let's cover some of these as we go through. So things that you need to consider when looking at your BrightSign devices. First of all, are you going to need live TV input via a top box or via an IPTV? If it's via an IPTV, all of your devices are going to be absolutely fine. If it's via a top box, you'll need to look at the XT4 and you'll need to look at that 1144 device that has your HDMI input as well as output. All of these devices require micro SD cards, so consider that you're going to need to have a micro SD card for each one of them. They'll obviously come with their own power cable, but you'll need an Ethernet cable as well. Wi-Fi and Bluetooth are optional across the board, but they are at an additional cost. So if you do want a Wi-Fi card, you'll need to purchase those and then you'll need to install them yourself, or your reseller will need to install them by removing the screws off of the back and actually putting the card in there with the aerial that comes and then replaces this purple or this black dot here. So you can do Wi-Fi, but it's not automatically built into these players across the board in BrightSign, so consider that as well. GPIO terminals, some of these devices do come with GPIO, which is general purpose in and out, which basically just means there's a whole configuration of different units that you can purchase that work alongside that. To have a look at the terminal here, this is a version. You're not going to be able to see it there, but I'll zoom in and give you a view of that as we go through this as well. Finally, there is a range of services that actually are using BrightSign inside. So there is MIMO monitors and Bluefin. Both of these systems are actually taking the insides of the BrightSign and they're turning them into full-on system-on-chip screens. So small 7-inch screens all the way up to 55-inch screens that allows you to utilize the power of the BrightSign players, but it's actually built into touchscreen or just non-interactive screens, and those are both kind of approved by BrightSign and using the internals of BrightSign as well. So let's talk about BSN.Cloud. BrightSign has its own platform called BSN.Cloud, which is its cloud service, allows you to manage and monitor and configure and control your BrightSign estate. So regardless of whether you've got 1 to 10 or 10 to 1,000, you can build out this estate via BSN.Cloud and manage your players and your content from there. It was previously BrightAuthor. Now BrightAuthor was what we'd be using to configure these players, and that would be local only. That's now been superseded by BSN.Cloud because that brings that cloud element to manage. Now BrightSign is a fantastic set of hardware, and one of the things that they really are cognizant of is that there is CMS platforms out there that can do things that their platform can't. So within BSN.Cloud, you actually have the ability to go in and select the CMS of your choice and install that entirely remotely via BSN.Cloud. Signage Live is one of those approved CMS platforms, so you can go onto BSN.Cloud and say, I've got my BrightSign here, but I actually like to install Signage Live so I can manage my content, and that's entirely remotely built into that player. So with BSN.Cloud, you can basically select the CMS of your choice and start utilizing that for your general content management and player management, where you can still use the BSN.Cloud functionality to go and configure and actually control your players in a little bit more of a granular level down onto that technical side. So that is pretty much everything that you need to know about BrightSign and BSN.Cloud and bDeploy and all of the different configurations of the BrightSign devices out there, and why you should buy the LS device over the XT device or the HD device instead of the XD device. Understanding your configuration and what you're going to be utilizing your digital signage for is super important here. Now, one thing I will just leave you with is this device here. If you have one of these, this is an older model, so we don't support these ones directly. If you do have one of these, you're probably looking to upgrade, and I would advise it's probably about the right time to. But if you've got any other questions and like to speak to us further about BrightSign or understanding which player is right for you or when to configure what, feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to help you, and we'll speak to you again on the next one.